Let's see how many times it takes me to do the intro today. This is the GI Microcast recorded on Friday the 6th of September 2024. I'm James Batchelor, Editor-in-Chief of GamesIndustry.biz. I'm joined by Head of GamesIndustry.biz, Chris Dring. How's it going, sir?
Yeah, it's busy. We're gearing up for our big show in less than 2 weeks. Oh, God. It's our HR Summit in 2 weeks, and it is in the Best Place to Work Awards, and it is... I cannot see the wood for the trees. It is there's too much going on. There's too many emails. There's too many people asking questions.
Yeah.
Help me, save me. All that.
Well, this was the aim. Is like Microcast is giving you a brief break from HR Summit prep, but I can imagine like your life is basically everything up to September 18th and everything after.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, I'm looking forward to Zelda. Is the thing for me.
Nice.
How are you?
I'm good. Just first full week back after holiday, and just a kind of easing back into it. And it's been a week. Like it's straight back into 2024 layoffs, studio closures, Concord's disaster, which we'll get onto in a bit. Like it's the.
I loved how out of date our podcast was within minutes of posting it live.
Oh,
there was a bit
great.
we had to cut out about where we talked about Rocksteady having not laid off any staff despite the flop, and it was
barely like 4 hours after we'd recorded.
Yeah,
that they announced this. It's just it's 2024. It is rough. We are seeing we're still going through tough times in the industry. It's tough to cover. It does. I mean, it's not really a silver lining, but it does give you. It does create conversations that it's worth kind of digging into, or kind of understanding.
Hey, we've got a lot of work to do. Nobody's making any money, and we're all going to be out of a job soon. But hey, there's a lot to chat about.
Yes,
there's good conversation can be had
Absolutely.
From this misery.
Okay. Before we descend too far into despair, shall we crack into some of the biggest stories of the week? Main one, obviously, we're going to be talking about is Concord. But before that, there was a related Sony story. I say related, I mean a Sony story. Therefore, that's the relation that I did want to kind of touch on. A lot of sites have been covering a Financial Times interview with Hiroki Totoki, who's the Chief Financial Officer at Sony Corporation. And there was one quote in particular that they've all latched onto. He said, whether it's for games, films or anime, we don't have that much IP that we fostered from the beginning. We're lacking the early phase of IP, and that's an issue for us. Now, the headline that spawned was lots of, essentially, Sony says it doesn't have enough IP. And I found myself reading these and thinking, like, that may be true for, like, films and anime. But when you look at games, you've got, like, God of War, Last of Us, Horizon, Astrobot, Uncharted. You go back to like Jack and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, Ape Escape. Like all like it's not short on IP.
The word fostered's key here.
Yeah,
like they're talking about stuff that they've looked after, maintained, and turned into big franchises. Which, to be fair, up until relatively recently in games, they never really did that. Like for them, it was like the games were there to where's Infamous now? Where's Killzone now? Where's Jack and Daxter now? Where's Sly Cooper now? Like, and nowadays they do things like they take The Last of Us and Uncharted. But even then, like the Uncharted film's done pretty well. It's pretty good actually. It wasn't that bad, but they've not had a game for 8 years. So you've got this. I don't think he's saying anything particularly inaccurate there. I mean, obviously they've got lots of games IP they can nurture and develop, and I think they know that. And they're doing that, right? There was a Gran Turismo movie last year, The Last of Us TV show. But I think discussing the fact they don't have things where they're right now they can sit there and go, oh, we've got this big franchise, we've got this big franchise, we've got this big franchise. They sort of don't. Their biggest game of the last, Helldivers 2, but their biggest title in the last 2 years is Spider-Man, which is a Marvel IP, right? So I don't think it's an inaccurate sentence really, but it is it is interesting that comes on the day they launch a new IP, or a week in period of time they launch a new IP that doesn't do anything, and they launch another new IP which has done incredibly well in review terms. So it's a weirdly timed comment.
It has been heartening to see the Astrobot reviews. Like it's going down so well. I'm itching to get my hands on that one.
It's a very critics game, though, right? It's a very there's a lot. I know that we are two of them. We're a industry made up of Nintendo fans. So when somebody makes a really good Mario style game, we're like, yes, 9 10s, 10 10. Then it will do about 5 million units, which is great. For the record, I put on Twitter like, don't expect God of War sales. No one's expecting that. Now I know nobody is, but I just want to, this isn't. this is it'll do very well. It'll be great numbers, but and it's made by like 65 people in 3 years. Like it's going to be a great example of what you can do where you don't need 500 people and half a decade to put something together, and you can still do a very successful game. He says the numbers aren't in yet. The game's not even on sale yet. It's it would have been by the time this podcast has come out.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. What were we talking about? What's going on?
Well, we were saying about like Astrobot's going to be a much needed success story for Sony, because all the conversation this past week has been about Concord. Sony announced very shortly after we released our previous podcast did Sony send Concord out to die? About 5 hours later, yes, it killed it. Yes, it did. So Sony pulled Concord from sale 2 weeks after launch. Servers turn off today, September 6th. All players can be refunded. They've said that they're going to kind of explore options on how to take the game forward. They're going to revisit and what went wrong and so forth, but there's no kind of commitment to this will return.
Just put it in the subscription service. Put it into PS Plus. I don't know why that wasn't.
I don't know why they didn't do that from the beginning anyway.
Yeah, they did it with Destruction All Stars, which was their other live service thing they released like 4 years ago that nobody wanted. Like sure, it probably didn't work either, but it would give them an immediate audience. And here's the thing. Like we're talking about the game, not talking about they've released a dud. Like I heard the game's all right, it's a perfectly solid game.
Consistently, I hear that this is fun to play. It's just not enough people have bought it, so it's not a bad product as such. Like it's raising the question of like, is it? And I know we got into this last week about like a live service is not a genre. It's like it's a business model that encompasses all sorts of genres. But is there fatigue around live service games? Is there fatigue around hero shooters? You know what I'm saying?
Hero, yes. Hero shooters, sure. But there's not live service. The challenge of live, we've talked about this so many times. The challenge of live service is people who want to play live service games are playing live service games, right? They've got a game they've pumped hundreds of hours into, and they've got a big community of people, and you're trying to coax them off those games into playing your games. It's difficult and it's a challenge. It's really hard. But if you can pull it off, or even pull it off to a small degree, you've got a real big success on your hands. And here's the thing, Sony's one of the only big games studios, big games publishers that doesn't have a big live service title, right? Almost everyone has one. It could, not all of them are GTA Online or FIFA level, but it could be a Rainbow Six Siege or Microsoft's got a dozen, right? So I think PlayStation does need to have these games. And I think the idea that PlayStation, I know I'm sort of taking umbrage with an opinion piece on our own website, which says it's not very PlayStation, this sort of thing. And I'm like, well, it kind of is. I tested Warhawk back in 2007. Like, the PlayStation were making metaverse games before metaverse was even a buzzword. Like they used to do this stuff all the time. And I think they need to have some of this stuff, because the other model they're playing in was big action, AAA, super expensive single player action adventure games is also really challenged, because the budgets for those are going up ridiculously, and but the growth in terms of users isn't. So they've got that challenge, Sony, on the one side, and the other side is, well, actually maybe we should have a couple of live service games. And let's be honest, their strategy originally was let's make 15 of them, or however many the number was.
It was 12 within 3 years, I think it was.
Let's release 12 in 3 years. And they didn't expect 12 to succeed.
No.
In fact, I think they would have been happy with 3 of them did, right? And it's if they did really well. And okay, then nobody's commissioning games with the idea they're going to fail, but they know they won't all work, but they were taking a sort of catalog approach to a live service launches. And we talked about this last week. It doesn't necessarily work that way, but I think Sony should be making these games. And the thing is, I think from a fan perspective, the audience perspective, is that there hasn't been many of the big single player epic PlayStation games that people love, right? So he says on the launch day of Astrobot, but but there hasn't been that many. There was Spider-Man last Christmas, and before then it was God of War, like the year before. So it's been a really quiet period for PlayStation first party games, and we also don't have an idea of what's next. Right? When is the next big? We have no idea. There's nothing on the schedule. I know there's a Wolverine somewhere. And that's causing anxiety and anger, I guess, frustration from PlayStation's core fan base. They're going, hey, we want more. Where's our PlayStation Studios games that we back and we love? Where are those titles? And they're not ready yet. But these games, Concord isn't stopping that from existing. It's a different developer that specializes in these sort of games. Marathon is from Bungie. Fair Games is from another new studio. It's not they've not. I think I said all this. I'm repeating what we said last week a little bit, but I think Sony does need to be making these sort of games. And look, most of them may fail. Maybe all of them will fail. Helldivers 2 hasn't, but maybe it won't work out. But I think it's important that all companies are trying to push themselves to do new things. Because if they didn't, Nintendo would still be making playing cards. So I see all the rhetoric on social media about Sony should stick in their lane and do what they do, and I'm like, I don't think it doesn't make business sense to do that, and B, I don't think that's a good message to send to anybody. We should all be taking risks and giving things a go, and it's a shame Concord didn't work.
And the theory is that the theory surely behind it, or part of the theory behind Sony's big live service push is, as you say, launching 12 games, they don't expect all 12 to become a new Fortnite. But if 3 of them do, if 2 of them do, if one of them just becomes a big...
One of them becomes a Fortnite, yeah.
If one of them becomes a Fortnite, yeah, job done. But that money then enables them to invest more in their big AAA blockbusters, trying to do new things,
In theory,
yeah.
You might. That's the idea. Well, it sounds good, doesn't it? But they probably end up just investing in more live service.
That's true. Yeah.
But I think for Sony know Herman Holst is the guy from Guerrilla, right? He made the Killzone games. He makes the big action. Guerrilla. I know they're doing a live service title, but that's a studio that specializes in these super high quality, high production value single player games. It's what they're known for. It's what he's known for, and he knows that's what PlayStation's about, and they all know what PlayStation's about. And anyone that and here's the thing, I know I've always gotten very well with Jim Ryan when he was the PlayStation CEO, but PlayStation's management isn't like a dictatorship, right? Whoever's in charge doesn't go, right, this is what we're going to do, and everyone just follows blindly suit. Like, the management of PlayStation is a consistent period of promotion. The 2 people in charge of PlayStation now were the number 2s for Jim, and Jim was the number 2 for Andy, right? And it's and Andy was the number 2 for Kaz. Right? You start looking back throughout the history of PlayStation CEOs. They continue each other up. They continue each other's journey. PlayStation's been surprisingly consistent. They've made missteps and they've made bad calls and they've tried things that haven't worked out. Of course, let's not forget the Vita, or the PlayStation 3. But they are a company that's been consistent in terms of the brand and who they are. They know what their audience is. They know what they like. And although everyone's getting sort of going, Concord isn't really PlayStation, within 2 weeks of that, he released Astrobot, which is very PlayStation. And so it's the most PlayStation thing I've ever seen. So let's be clear here, that was their big title for this quarter. They've been pushing that and marketing that heavier than Concord. They know that's the game that their fans are going to most relate to, and I think it sort of speaks to that is what PlayStation is, and that is what PlayStation's doing. And I don't think it sends a message, as the fans want to say. No. I think it's just that PlayStation's always knew. They've known for a long time who they are, what they do. They're just trying to expand out of that, and that is what Concord was part of. I worry about the studio now, because I suspect they had members of the team planning to update and support the game post-launch.
That is my concern. The plan will have been to have people in place to support this post-launch, continue kind of developing new content, new updates, do the whole live service thing. And now that that's not necessarily on the cards, the game may return, but that's not necessarily on the cards. There's a lot of people at that studio who their function, their purpose may have changed or been removed entirely. So I'm really hoping. Again, I hate that we've got to the stage of this industry where, because Firewalk's a new studio and Concord is its debut title. And I hate that this industry is at the stage where if your first title doesn't take off and isn't the hit that it needs to be, granted, needs to be not pulled from sale 2 weeks after launch, that's it. The writing's on the wall almost for the studio.
Yeah, it depends on whether your backer has plans for you beyond it, right? I don't know what Firewalk was working on, and maybe Haven Studios needs some help, or maybe Firesprite needs some help, or there might be things they can do. They can pivot that studio towards, but yeah, it's a worry. I'd
be intrigued to know. We won't know this for years, but I'd love to know what lessons Sony takes from Concord and then applies to Fair Games and Marathon over at Bungie. Like, you know, like it's still got these live service games in development. As you say, it does need one for its portfolio. It needs that kind of to have something in that kind of that space, to have that kind of recurrent revenue. And I think, like, you know, like the pressure is increasing now. Like, it's daft. Obviously, Helldivers took off really well earlier this year, and Concord hasn't. And so you can't like Concord's failure does not negate Helldiver's success. But Concord's failure is the one that everyone is talking about right now, and has kind of shaken faith in Sony's ability to do live service games. So I think they're going to be doubling down and trying to make sure that Fair Games and Marathon and whatever else they've got in the works, and the Horizon one,
MMO,
the Horizon MMO, etc. Like whatever else they've got, they're going to be doubling down, really kind of analysing, right, what happened with Concord? Why didn't this work out? Why didn't players gravitate towards it?
Yeah, but we all saw it coming, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like nobody's sitting there going, can't believe Concord wasn't a hit. We knew it wasn't going to be. And we knew Suicide Squad wasn't going to be. And we knew Hyenas wasn't going to be. And so I have to think Sony knew it wasn't going to be.
You would hope so, yes.
But the market shifts and changes, and it's really difficult. And it's always difficult playing games at this level. You know, you can pretty much, Sony can bank on the next God of War do really well for them, right? I think they know that. And, you know, I know we're going to talk Star Wars later on in the what do the numbers mean, but, you know, what you think is, it's a really tough market anyway. But it's also a massively unpredictable one. And I think, you know, you've got to release a good game, and you've got to hope, you've got to get lucky. You've just got to get lucky. And PlayStation's got all the tools it needs to put itself in a good position to get lucky, right? It's got great developers that can make great games. It's got the marketing channels. It's got the store channels. It's got itself all of the power that it needs to better get lucky. But even then, it still needs to get lucky and find an audience. And it's really, this year is like, did I say it to you last week? If you told me that the biggest game studios, the biggest game companies this year will be Arrowhead and Game Science, and I'm like,
Local Thunk, and it's just
who? So I don't know half these. What's the Power World devs like? It'll be like I never heard of half these developers, and then you tell me games like Star Wars and Final Fantasy and the big new live shooter from Sony will be, you know, not working out quite so well. I would be like, no, I can't believe that. But it is a really hard market to predict, and you know, no wonder investors and publishers investors in particular are a bit freaked out by us right now, because it's almost impossible to know what's going to.
That's the thing, like it's that lack of predictability that's causing the issue here. Because, like, as you've said, like on previous Microcasts and you know, in our conversations around this, like, the problem whenever these games come out is they were the perfect game for when they were greenlit, for when they were invested in. Like, something would have been, you know, popular at that time that encouraged Sony, encouraged Firewalk to think, yes, this is going to be the one. This is our hit for us. And the industry changes so quickly. Consumer tastes change so quickly. You've got so many games coming out, like, and you know, of a similar vein, that it means that by the time you've put your game out, because development cycles are, you know, 3, 4, 5 years, however long they are, you're launching to a completely different market than the one that when you first started. And that's impossible to predict. Like, you can only hope that what was popular then is still popular now. Yeah. We've said this before, like, the industry is historically just chases trends. Like, it's an industry that always chases, like, the fad, the big popular thing. Like, slight tangent, and I know we had a kind of conversation about this. Like, if this episode goes out on the right, you know, on time, today, Monday 9th of September, is the 10th anniversary of Destiny, and Destiny was one of those games that so many people chased, and you saw it for years. Like, games like Anthem, games like Marvel's Avengers, like, all these games were built and greenlit around the fact that Destiny did amazingly, like, was, you know, on a whole other level that hadn't happened before. But by the time those games came out, the appetite wasn't there for it, or people were playing Destiny still, or
Yeah, and that's really hard for, like, you know, people say Sony don't do Me Too. They've always done a bit of Me Too. Like, you know, let's not forget what the PlayStation Move was. But they are. It's really hard to, when you're sitting there and you want to get a big budget, a big game. The people who are going to invest that money, they're going to go, right, we're going to spend 100 million, 200 million on this title. how do we know it's going to do? That's going to make that money back, and you need to point to metrics and evidence that it's going to do that, and you can't do that if your game's a completely original idea that no one's ever done before, right? It's a risk. What I will say is that platform holders are in a better position than like EA's and Take-Two's and Ubisoft's to be able to make those calls, because they have less, it's cheaper for them to release games because they don't have their fees attached to them. And I always give a great example. I've talked about this podcast. My favorite game of the last 10 years is Sea of Thieves. I adore Sea of Thieves, but I can't imagine anyone outside of maybe Nintendo, Microsoft and Sony who would have commissioned that title. Like, I can't see. It's such a weird, bonkers game that goes against all the rules, and and as a result of it, it works, right? And so it's difficult. And you can. Here's the thing: sometimes it works out. Sometimes chasing the trend does result in a hit. Call of Duty was chasing Medal of Honor, right? We do see plenty of examples of a game that chases another, and then it becomes. Fortnite was like PUBG, right? So you've got this sort of evidence of it, but it's about timing and also competition, and it's difficult. And in an industry where these games take 5 years to make, right? If you've already spotted a trend, you probably missed it. So anyway,
before we move on, do you think we'll see Concord again? Because we've seen so many comeback stories over the years, like Drive Club, No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk 2077. Like, will this be one that 2-3 years from now?
The problem with Cyberpunk wasn't the game idea wasn't good. It was that it was broken.
That's true. Yeah,
I don't think Concord's broken as a game. I think it's just not appealing to people. And they could release it as a free to play title maybe, and maybe people would jump on board with it. But maybe. Weirdly,
though, we've seen a trend of some games doing the opposite of going free to play to premium. Like over the last year, there's like 5 or 6 examples that I can't remember off the top of my head because I wrote them in an article earlier. But it's like Gigantic, Relic Hunter's Legend. I can't remember the other ones, but there've been like 5 or 6 games that started off as free to play and have gone premium.
My instinct is no, unless they find a way to rework it as a single player adventure game.
Yeah,
I don't know how realistic that is. They've obviously put a lot of effort into it. It's apparently technically very impressive. So there's been a lot of work in there, and they won't want that to go to waste. But if you can't find a big enough audience for it, then it's not going to work, because you need people playing it to be able to play with each other online. So
I'm waiting for Marvel Rivals, which comes out in December. That's another hero shooter, like massive IP. If that struggles, if that fails, then we are officially done with hero shooters. So.
Yeah, I don't. It's a weird thing, isn't it? The thing is with licensed games, they don't guarantee anything anyway.
No, that's
true. I actually look at when EA signed all those, they do a Black Panther game, and they'll say, "Oh, we're doing it," and someone else, Skydance is doing a.
Captain America, Black Panther.
Yeah. Well, so I sort of, it was Iron Man game for EA, isn't it? I sort of look at that and go, I don't think. I think they're as risky to do as a new IP in some ways, because it's just,
and more expensive because you've got to buy the license.
Well, we already share the revenue, right? It's just for me, it's some of them work. Sometimes you can take a Spider-Man and stick it. You take a game like Sunset Overdrive and reskin it with Spider-Man and do, add some extra bits in it, and you've got yourself a game that works and connects. But then I don't think you can just put Star Wars characters in a Ubisoft open world game and expect it to work.
Damn it, you beat my segue. I was just sitting here thinking, this is perfect, and I'm going to lean into it. So, okay. Chris, it is time to ask you, what do the numbers mean?
It does, yeah. Well, carry on. You go on.
So, previous weeks we talked about Star Wars Outlaws. You had your predictions about how well it would do.
I was wrong.
Spoiler alert, Chris was wrong. We still don't have full and official sales figures, but we do know enough that we know that it's been disappointing.
It has been disappointing. Yeah, look, get me wrong, it's not Concord disappointing. No. But it's I said I think it will sit somewhere between Star Wars Jedi Survivor and Lego Star Wars, and I'm wrong. It doesn't get anywhere near either of those games. And look, there's some data missing. There's some retailers and stuff, information that's missing from the GSD figures that I've looked at, but it's not far off Avatar numbers at the minute, and Avatar was disappointing. And you would expect a Star Wars IP to resonate more with consumers than the Avatar IP. The game is apparently pretty good, but not amazing. right? It's not like 10 out of 10. And in an industry where, competition is this fierce, I think quality matters. But even then, I am genuinely surprised at what I've seen for this game, and in fact, a bit horrified about just not about Ubisoft or anything particular. I know Ubisoft shareholders are freaking out a little bit about it, and understandably.
So we ran a story the other day, like Ubisoft shares dipped to like a 10-year low. I saw one person point to a graph that, like, apparently at one point it dipped to as low as it was in 2000. Or something stupid like that, but so it's taken a bit of a hit. Shareholders are panicking, which is not great. No,
I'm alarmed by it, right? And and this just goes to show how hard this market is to predict. You go, right, Ubisoft massive, an incredible studio. The game is good, right? It's not a bad game. They've not turned out a dud, right? Put out a good game, it's got a huge IP attached to it, and it's sort of. So,
this is the terrifying thing. Like you said just there, like it's not a bad game. Like I hear it's great. Like Sophie McAvoy, our staff writer, is playing it. She absolutely loves it. I played a little bit of it at Gamescom. I absolutely adored it. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. We've literally just said about Concord. It's not a bad game. So quality of game isn't as much of a factor in success anymore. Like you can't. And not that it ever was, but. Even less so nowadays. You can't just say, like, this is a great game, therefore it will do well.
Yeah,
and that's
terrible, technically impressive or whatever. It's like and look, I think I think even though you look at games like we talk about Alan Wake 2. We could pick on Alan Wake 2 quite a bit actually because I think that game's done quite well. But like that game was like one of the best games of last year. Quality can deliver big numbers, but it isn't. There is a lot of factors in play here. And I'm look. It's not over for the game. It hasn't sold, atrociously. It is a quiet year, really. But if I suspect Ubisoft's, PR marketing is going to very much pivot towards Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I think will be. I mean, I've seen that game, and I'm like, I played Star Wars Outlaws at Summer Games Fest, and then I saw Assassin's Creed Shadows, and there was a gap between. There was a very noticeable quality jump there, but Assassin's Creed is also their own brand and their own IP, and it's also far more bankable, I think. But
that's going to be a fun one for a future. What do the numbers mean? Because Valhalla obviously was the first Assassin's Creed to reach $1 billion in revenue. I'm really intrigued to see if Shadows does the same.
Shadows' challenge is it's only on PS5 and Xbox Series S and X, so it doesn't have and PC. So it doesn't have the PS4 audience this time. So it might be a little bit of a slower burn in terms of like getting to that figure, but I think it will be. I mean, I thought those Star Wars Outlaws was going to do all right. I seen that. I think it looks great. I think it will do well in Japan, right? You saw how Ghost of Tsushima did in terms of a Western developed game and how that did in Japan. And I think this has a good chance of cracking a big games market that that Western devs don't normally get to do. But yeah, I'm a little anxious. I'm a little disappointed in Star Wars Outlaws, and I feel sorry. I don't feel sorry for the team. The game's lots of many people are playing it. Right? It's not Concord style. No one's pulling this game from sale after 11 days. But it is. It just wasn't. It wasn't the breakout hit. I was looking at. It was number 2 on the IGN playlist thing, but a lot of that came from last year's Summer Games Fest. They haven't been able to carry the momentum through. It's a shame, and there is a little bit of fatigue around Star Wars. I know, like that TV show they did, was it The Acolyte, whatever, didn't do great for them, and that kind of things. And so there may have been a few other factors you can sort of analyze around why this didn't. Reviews weren't quite high enough. The IP is struggling a little bit, but it didn't have much competition. It's the first, I'd say, significant AAA open world game we've had this year. Maybe Final Fantasy VII Remake 2, whatever. But so I'm a little sad about it, really. It's a weird market, though. It's hard to predict.
It's a very hard market to predict. On that not even vaguely optimistic note, we are going to wrap up there. Chris, thank you so much for joining me as always.
Astrobot is amazing, though.
Yeah, let's finish on that. Astrobot's amazing. Happy Astrobot Day, everyone. Chris, thank you so much for joining me as always.
Thank you, James. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much, listeners, for joining us on this. You can, if you haven't already, subscribe to the GamesIndustry.biz podcast on the podcasting platform of your choice. You can find more news, insight, and analysis into the world behind video games at GamesIndustry.biz. And do be sure to sign up to the GI Daily. That's our newsletter. That's at GamesIndustry.biz/newsletters. That's 3 links you've got to go and follow now. That's enough from me. Thank you so much, and we'll be back next week.